Gainesville Community Reinvestment Area Advisory Board, April 19th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. We'll begin with roll call.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Member Brown.
Here.
Member Osgood. Member Fox. Member Ivy.
Here.
Member Mitchell.
Present.
Member Norquist. Just excuse what I believe he is in Zoom. Member Blount.
Here.
Member Palmer.
Here.
Member Seawright. We have a quorum with 5 present.
Great. Can we get a motion to adopt the agenda?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is adopted. All right. Can I get a motion for the approval of the minutes? Motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded. All right. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right. Now on to communication. Chair's report. Guess that kind of comes to me, huh? Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know. Did anybody else get a chance to go back and watch the joint city community meeting on some of the future of the GCRA, those sort of things? Anybody see that? I don't know. One thing I did want to bring up, at least at some point during conversation, I'd like to ask if staff could, I guess maybe organize a list of some of the motions that we made. One of the big things that stood out to me during that meeting is that it seemed like some of the people on city commission, I mean, and especially in regards to specifically like power district, some of the people on both the city commission and county commission were kind of unaware that we had already made a motion about some of our opinions on the power district. And so I wanted to make sure that and maybe some of the other motions that we had maybe made in 2021 got a chance to go back to the commission so that they could see that, you know, one of the things it felt like is that maybe they weren't aware that we had been actually doing things over the course of the last couple of years. So I'd like to, you know, just make sure that they get that. But yeah, other than that, on to the director's report. Yeah,
Because I need to come up here. Wherever I'm on camera. Good evening. As you all know, Sarah resigned effective March 31st. So the city manager appointed me interim director. My name is Phil Mann. I am the special advisor to the city manager on infrastructure and project management. My day job is I'm the director of public works. So I'm just holding the seat down until we can hire a new CRA director. One of the things on my update is that GCRA has 4 positions currently posted for hire, and one of those is the GCRA director, the GCRA manager, business operations coordinator, and a project manager level 3 or 4. On April 28th, next Thursday, the GPC meeting, the GCRA will be bringing forward a presentation to the city commission outlining the current status of GCRA projects. We'll be providing these presentations updates on a regular basis to the commission at GPC, and we'll also bring those updates to the board at a regular interval as well. To your comment about the city and county commission, that was one of the strategies the city manager and I had discussed to make sure that the commission is aware of everything that CRA is doing. In the older days when there was an independent authority, CRA staff met with the commission on a monthly basis and went over every project. Now as a separate department, those projects aren't presented to the city commission except for when action is needed. And speaking as a department head, a lot of times those are even on consent agenda, so they approve them when they adopt the consent agenda. So this was a strategy to provide the commission with a regular update as to exactly what the CRA is doing so they can see activity. And I don't even know that I've spoken to staff about this yet, so they may tell me, but we're currently also going to do the same presentation to the county commission, try to keep everybody on the same page. But obviously the city commission gets first dibs.
Yeah.
And the other announcement on my thing is the annual report with the unaudited financials is published and available. I think somebody has printed copies here. If you all want, you guys already have them. So that's everything I have. We're still working through the audit process.
Great. Member Plum?
I have two questions about the director position. You know, the closing date the city is put on the applications for that?
I do not. I asked for it to be advertised in the month.
And this other question may not be appropriate to ask. Are you intending to apply? Is that an appropriate question?
That's an appropriate. I will take it. I intend to be the public works director until I retire or I move up. This would be allowed. So I'm an engineer, so my career is built in public works. No offense to any engineer. That's a compliment.
Great. Well, short of any other questions, yeah, thank you very much. We look forward to your stewardship. Staff report?
Mr. Chairman, the only, not a report, but the only note that I want to point out within the agenda, the downtown, for whatever reason, the downtown strategic plan item did not print the agenda item title. Just it's about the downtown strategic plan.
Should be noted for everyone that we will be discussing the downtown strategic plan as part of our agenda. I believe that is the only bit of business item for today. That is. Sure. And then we will continue onto the consent agenda.
Yes, sir.
Is there any items from the consent agenda to bring up?
I'm interested in an update on part B. Anything that we can know about the cornerstone project and closing the status of that.
Okay. Are you available for a brief report for that?
Yeah.
All right, then, yeah, let's bring we need a motion for that?
So
We generally have that to the end of the agenda
Okay,
because we have folks from out of town, so we'll just go with some at the beginning and then.
or do we need a motion to add that?
you would move to approve the agenda with the exception of that particular item, which will be discussed.
Okay, do we have a motion to move to place the hardwood update at the end of the agenda as discussed?
An issue that we need to as well as cornerstone issues.
Okay, do we have a second on that?
Seven.
All right, all in favor?
Uh,
All opposed? Got an update for you to the end of the meeting. All right, and I guess we'll move on to our main business. Or I guess requests to address the board first. Is there any requests to address the board at this time? Okay, no request to address the board. Let's move on to our business discussion with the downtown strategic plan.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Redfeld. I am the Economic Development and Innovation Director, and I work in the Department of Sustainable Development. And this evening, we wanted to bring to you our work to date on the downtown strategic plan. I'm going to present a few introductory slides, and so he's going to provide a couple more. And then we have our consultant, MKSK, that's going to walk the board through a presentation on where we are with the plan as of today. I wanted to preface my couple of comments by saying that this is a pretty big week in the process. We have your meeting tonight. We have as you'll see on the handout that's provided, we have a community meeting scheduled for tomorrow from 5 to 7 at the plaza. We have to have you participate if you're available. And then we'll be going to the city commission on Thursday. And our intent is really to test the ideas and present them to them, and hopefully get your input and then timelines that we need. Bring that to the city commission sometime in some GCRA for final adoption. So we're going to start with this slide, and I'm going to try to use this doohickey here to advance the slides and see how successful I am. Just as some background, I wanted to mention that the background and the project overview is that the city commission had recognized the need to develop a strategic plan for the downtown, to develop a vibrant, alive downtown with expanding residential and commercial opportunities. The city commission does have a strategic plan. It's not the comprehensive plan, it's a strategic plan for the entire city. The downtown strategic plan is a top priority for the city commission. As a result, we were provided the direction to go out to secure the help of a consultant, which we did at the end of 2020, and we went through a RFP process, evaluation, and a contract with MKSK, who's here tonight, is going to present, and who has presented to the board on a couple of other things. And then they are in partnership with a couple of subcontractors, development strategies that are as a representative here, and then locally a lot of EPA engineer in town. Others coming for this board and others in the city. So we executed that contract in November 2020. And just as a reminder, that the contract was a $250,000 contract and was funded jointly by the GCRA and the University of Florida. I think at this point we've expended about 70% of that contract, or about $175,000. Yes, 50%. Myself and Sari are now in the Department of Sustainable Development, and we've been the project lead. Will continue to be, I think, until. Just snap our fingers. Oh, we can. Yeah, we'll do it. So anyway, this is the timeline basically. We are in April, and we've been doing a lot of project planning and engagement. Sari's going to talk about that in a second, and then we are moving shortly here into the final plan adoption stage. So over the next couple of months, we would like to probably after this we'll debrief with MKSK, but we would probably like to wrap this up in July, August, more likely August. People are back from home. Next. Okay, next slide.
Good evening, Sarah. Can you hear me? And so as Eric mentioned, we have had a lot of community engagement and continuing. We've been in front of you at least 3 times, and we will come back again. We have a neighbor advisory group, which is kind of a steering committee for the project that has also met with us 3 times. It has a representative from your board, from the county, from the city, from the chamber, from UF, a variety of neighbors, business owners, property owners, younger leadership. And it's a very diverse and active group, so that has been very good. And we have tomorrow, the second community meeting at the Bodega Plaza between 5 and 7. We hope that people will join us. And also at the meeting, we will have a variety of community organizations tabling and involved all businesses in downtown and we invited to table at the event, and we will have a few. And CRA staff is going to help us man those stations, and we'll be there also to share information about GCRA. And we've also contacted neighborhood associations in East Gainesville, from Duval to Lincoln Heights, Cedar Grove, Spring Hill, and we've had a few meetings, including home associations with Cedar Grove, and we met a couple of times with the Nico family and their contacts to discuss the drafts and ideas that we have. And we went down to Bodega Plaza to meet with people at community events and hand out surveys and email dozens of leaders in the community in different parts of the city, trying to reach out to get on newsletters, to get on different events, and just share the word, spread and receive feedback. We went door to door with postcards to invite people and business owners to the neighborhood meeting, and we're continuing. So this month, just this morning, we met with UF leadership. Today we're here with you. Tomorrow we have the community meeting. On Thursday we will be at the city commission, and in the coming months we will continue to engage and to receive feedback. Yeah.
Just in-place engagement, the appointments in people's living rooms or offices.
This is also an option, yes. But what
What's on the
here
list?
is that we went to Cedar Grove, for example, for their home association meeting, or things like that. Yeah. So a detailed engagement summary is in your backup with what was done until December. So that's not the end, but that was a snapshot. Yeah. So what is today? The purpose of today is actually to present to you a draft. So this is just an interim document. We came to you a few months ago, I believe in January maybe, with our engagement, and we talked about that. Based on all the input that was received and a lot of analysis and research, and you will see further today, the team has done an excellent job, I believe, and put together some great ideas. So you will see it starts with, this is what we've heard. These are the key 6 takeaways from the community. And here are ideas of how to proceed and how to develop these 6 ideas, 6 takeaways. So there'll be 6 boxes, 6 takeaways, and within those 16 ideas. And then also a little bit about, okay, so how are we going to implement any of that? So today we will talk about the takeaways from the community engagement, the ideas for moving forward, and considerations for implementation. So this is just a draft, and with what we hear this week and in the coming weeks, we will take all of that feedback and create a more refined final draft that will also include more next steps, implementation strategies, a little bit of numbers of starting, how do we start to implement. Next, please. So the idea is to come back in the summer, July or August, for final adoption of the plan. So we would like to hear from you, and any questions. It's more of a discussion rather than adopt the plan today. And we're here, and I will introduce Darren Meyer, a principal with MKSK, to present. Thank you.
It's good to see everyone this evening. My name is Darren with MKSK. Our first meeting when we came to Gainesville was a virtual meeting with the GCRA board, so it's great to be back in front of you at this point in the process. One of the things that we wanted to do is, building on what Eric and Sweet shared, is make sure through this conversation today and our public meeting tomorrow that we're on the right trajectory with this. That some of what we've heard through our conversations in the community and the ideas that have stemmed from those resonate with you, and reflect your understanding of what we're right for downtown Gainesville. Some slides coming up here. So you may have noticed, if you look quickly up there, there are 70 slides in this. We're not going to present all 70, but we have them available as some additional detail if there's an area that you want us to focus in on. So next slide, please.
It'd be better if we hold most of our questions till the end for you. Or-
That may be best. I mean, feel
Or-
free if you see something that raises a red flag, definitely let me know, but it'll be a fairly brief presentation then. So we'll share a little bit of a summary of what we heard through our engagement over the past several months, some of the ideas that have emerged from that, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps as well. Next slide, please. So as Eric mentioned, our process was split roughly into thirds. So the first third of it was really getting our feet wet and doing our best to understand in as nuanced a way as possible the dynamics in downtown Gainesville. And we do that through a lot of the conversations we've had through our public engagement process, but we're also looking at some data and seeing what some trends are and analyzing that as well. And putting those together for what is in phase two, which is some ideas that are built on a foundation of that input and that analysis we've done. And then once we get a check from this group, from the greater community on those ideas, see if we're on the right track, and make refinements if we're not, then we put some specific action items in place to help achieve those goals and aspirations. So we're working our way through that second step. Once we get some input, then we'll go back and put some action items together. Next slide, please. We can go ahead one more. And one more. Okay, so this is a little bit of what Sarit had referred to earlier in terms of our engagement process by the numbers. So there's a lot of numbers up here, but in summary, what we've attempted to do is use a number of tools: in-person conversations, at public events, online surveys. For those that aren't comfortable getting online with computers, we've handed out some paper surveys. And city staff has really done a fantastic job of trying to get out in the community and reach some of those parts of Gainesville that may not normally be part of the conversation through the planning process. And every process has room for improvement. And we recognize that, but we've put a good faith effort in trying to understand as best we can what are the perspectives from the folks that live and work in Gainesville with respect to downtown. So the number at top sort of captures all the various voices we've heard through surveys, conversations. I wanted to mention again our advisory group because this has been a really great group that has been appropriately critical of our process, and that's what we want. We want to hear things that we're doing wrong. We want to hear things that we do differently. And I think we've gotten some really great perspective from that group as well. That includes residents, downtown business owners, other stakeholders. So that advisory group that we met with last week to share some of this information has been really instrumental. Next slide, please. So in terms of the summary, and I think the green box may be just a sort of function of the technical. Yes, sir.
We're having a little bit of a technical issue. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Sorry, the folks on Zoom, the screen is cut off.
I don't know if any of us attend the meeting anymore where all the technology works right from the meeting, so certainly understandable. All right. So one of the first and most important things that we wanted to understand when we had conversations with the Gainesville community is what are those things related to downtown that you value? What are those things that you love? And part of the reason we want to do that is because if you start to think about the future of downtown, how investment takes shape, what downtown looks like in the future, we want to make sure that we protect and can enhance those things that the community does value. And so, when we talk about what are our favorite places, things downtown, the diversity of businesses came up in that conversation, the quality of the public realm, having green, walkable areas, some of the cultural assets, the arts, the theaters. And you can see geographically, we asked folks to place some dots where their favorite things were. You can see how those are aligned. So there's quite a bit in the historic core around Hippodrome and Diddley. Depot Park is one of the most beloved things that we heard about through our conversations, all the way up to the Thomas Center to the north as well. We also talked on the next slide about what are some of the opportunities to make improvements in downtown. And some of those include the idea of bringing more businesses to downtown. So more retailers, more places to shop, more places to eat. That really jumped out at number one. The ability to walk and bike safely through downtown and not feel too stressed out from all the traffic that's down there. Affordable housing, but in general, housing diversity of housing products, places to live downtown. But then you see on the bottom, parking, safety and lighting, homelessness, transit. These are some of the other things that emerge in our conversation that are opportunities for us to address. Next slide, please. And then when we ask questions directly, again, you can see a lot of similarities from previous discussion. Number one, more businesses and retail options. So you can see the importance of small business, startups, entrepreneurs, Black-owned businesses as being something that emerged. Again, the walkable streets, having a walkable and welcoming downtown, the uniqueness and diversity of downtown. And then parking was sort of an interesting one because we had comments on both sides of the coin. I think some folks felt that there's too much parking and it sort of takes away from the experience of being out on the street downtown. And others thought there was not enough and it was inconvenient to try and park downtown. So we heard a little bit on both sides of that. Next slide, please. So what we attempted to do after all of the 700 voices we mentioned through our surveys, through our conversations, what we wanted to do is try and identify and pull forward what are those key findings. What is the direction from the Gainesville community based on all those conversations? What are the things that we heard a lot? And this is something that we relied on our advisory group quite a bit for. So in our previous two meetings with the advisory group, we presented these 6, and our question was, do these sound right? Based on your understanding of Gainesville, downtown Gainesville, the people you talk to, your circles, do these resonate? Did we accurately discern what are those major things that either are aspirations or concerns for the Gainesville community? And from our advisory group, we did get affirmation on that. And that's something that we want to make sure we go through these conversations here as well. So the 6 things that emerge as major findings from our engagement with the Gainesville community. Number one is downtown needs to be a destination. And that's both for people that live in Gainesville. So it's a welcoming destination, regardless of where you live in Gainesville. It feels like a place that's hospitable and welcoming and a place you want to be, as well as a destination for visitors, attracting visitors, attracting fresh investment in the community. The second, connecting the dots, relates quite a bit to that idea of a walkable downtown. So both connecting the neighborhoods to downtown safely, but also downtown destinations to each other, making sure that you can move comfortably throughout downtown. Strengthening the relationship with adjacent neighborhoods. This took really 2 forms. One, again, was those connections. How does downtown engage with the adjacent neighborhood? But very importantly, we heard that the character of the neighborhood is important. So if you think about the corridors of University and Main, those are largely commercial corridors. And as you move outward, they transition into these near downtown neighborhoods. How does that transition take place? What does it look like? How do we preserve the character of those neighborhoods? It's extremely important. And that also has to do with the sort of meaning and value and stories that are in those neighborhoods too, that the community doesn't want to lose those. The next 2 are very closely related. So one is increasing housing opportunities. There is a fair amount of demand for student housing around the University of Florida. And I think the consensus that we've in our conversations is we would love to see non-student housing. We'd love to see housing that's affordable. We'd love to see workforce housing. We'd even love to see market rate housing downtown. We just want a diversity of housing products that isn't exclusively student housing. And there's a really strong relationship between housing and the local business environment. So your residential density, so to speak, can really affect the viability of businesses. You know, being able to start a business or expand a business relies a lot on rooftops and people that can walk and come to your business, especially Main Street retail types of businesses. So how do we create an environment that supports local businesses? The sixth and the last of the main themes that we heard, and I'm glad we heard this because as professionals in the planning and urban design fields, all of these resonated with us, but in particular, this last one is, who's the steward of downtown? If we have these ideas, and let's say we get some affirmation from the community that this is the right direction, we'd like to see these things take shape, who's responsible for implementing it? Who cares for it over time? How do we make sure that if we're attempting to create a great place, that we can maintain it over the long term and have that structure in place? So that's going to be really key for us. And one of the things that Eric and Street mentioned that we want input from this group and others and how to make sure we can do that. Okay, this is the last slide that I wanted to share, and we can sort of take this conversation wherever the board would like to. When we identified, part of the reason we asked our advisory group to affirm for us that these 6 findings seem to reflect the consensus of the community is we want our recommendations that come out of this plan to tie directly to those 6 findings from the community. So what we've done here that you see in the smaller print is we have 2 or 3 ideas or action items related to each of these 6 themes, which are going to help move the needle towards the goal for those 6 themes, whether it's about implementation or how to become a destination or addressing housing. We have some specific items that we want to start to refine and move ahead with if it seems that we have support for these moving. So what I wanted to do is sort of allow you to digest what's on the screen, think about those 6 boxes and those major moves there, and I'll stop. And if there's any particular area that board members have interest in hearing more detail or have questions, we can address that. Yes, sir.
I just want to ask you to describe more idea 6 and idea 7. Those are the only 2 I don't have an idea of what's happening.
Okay, and this is where it's going to be fun for not having the advantage because we're going to toggle ahead here. So in fact, I'm just going to.
Might give us just a.
It might be closer.
Okay.
Sorry, hold on. Before we transition slides, everybody had a chance to kind of like look over these real quick. I was still kind of going over them.
Okay, sure. We'll pause here for a moment. And
Yeah, actually, that's a great idea. Take a photo.
one of the challenges that we have is that there's so much bundled up in thinking about downtown and how to move it forward that it makes it very difficult to condense into a presentation. So we created a little bit of a table of contents here and we can work with that.
Yeah, everybody's got what they want to see, and yeah, let's move forward.
And what I'll do is I'll come back and rest on this slide once we there we go. All right, so I'm going to move through these quickly to get to the question. Okay, so idea 6 and 7 was your question, and this was underneath connect the dots. So for each of the 6 major themes that we heard, we've pulled some of the direct quotes and anecdotes from our conversation with the community and to support those. So you can see some comments about making downtown safer, more pedestrian friendly, prioritizing walking and biking. And this section included thinking about actually how close things are downtown. These bubbles show about a 5 to 6 minute walk shed, meaning from Depot Park, for example, you can get to anywhere in this green bubble in about a 5 minute walk. So a lot of these things are close together, but not necessarily comfortable to walk to. Thinking about gaps in the existing sidewalk network, particularly when it comes to safe movement from the neighborhoods to downtown. Parking is one thing that I mentioned earlier that people felt strongly on both sides of the coin. The one thing that we wanted to emphasize to this, including a number of strategies that you see here, is that it sounds a little bit like a cliche, but parking is very much, if you're visiting a location, not by foot. It's your first impression, and it's your last impression as well when you leave. So having the parking facilities, whether they're surface facilities or structure facilities, be welcoming, help you find your way through downtown, be safe, be comfortable, that's really paramount. So whether it's public safety issues or whether it's just lighting and fresh paint and wayfinding, making sure that we take advantage of those assets that are already built and making sure we get full use, full capacity out of those. Thinking about the good work that's already been done in terms of streetscape standards that are codified and looking at how we can prioritize streets that you see in red that need to be brought up to speed to those standards. And then this, number one, is getting to your question about ideas 6 and 7. So the first, which by the way, when we go through all of these ideas, these are coming from the community. So a lot of these you should recognize as hearing conversations, seeing articles in the paper about support for these types of things. But we share the excitement for the potential of the Sweetwater Corridor. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to daylight every linear foot of it in order to leverage great benefit out of it, although that would be wonderful to do over time. But the notion is all the way from downtown, Depot Park, Spring Hill, Lincoln Estates, up through the Power District, up through the downtown core to Duck Pond, it's for the northern end of the downtown area. This is really a great opportunity to not just create an A to B circulation route, but a linear park, a greenway that has some moments along there that you can stop and pause and enjoy nature. So the notion of having this sort of north to south greenway is really unique. And then the exciting part about is when you connect 6th Street, the rail trail, again coming down to Depot Park, you can envision this loop that really connects all of the neighborhoods to each other, connects them to downtown. If you recall that first slide that showed the 5 or 6 minute walk sheds, you're really within about a 5-minute walk from any downtown destination along this loop. So this could just be an amazing asset for the community, both from a leisure standpoint, but also just accessibility to some of those downtown amenities and destinations. Any other questions, Member Blunt, about those two ideas?
Just for the Sweetwater, also you're showing breaking around 4th Avenue and down 3rd Street, where the GIU facilities are still on the front too.
Right. Right in here, there's a little bit of a potential disconnect, at least in the short term, where that's buried through there. So this could be either a long-term solution or an interim solution within that larger greenway corridor.
Did you do, on this, did you do some work around, I guess, accessibility from the outside community, kind of the outside of those areas, and how easily people can, kind of hop on this if, say, they live, I don't know, in the historic district, but they want to be over there on, towards Santa Fe Center, and how easily it'd be for them to hop on the path and get around, that type of stuff?
Not in great detail, but I wholeheartedly support the notion behind that question, is that the value of this loop is directly related to how accessible it is to all those neighborhoods. So I think that next level of detail is looking at those connections to, if this is viable, if we can make this happen, how you connect, 5th Avenue quarters, the various neighborhoods and districts to that, those sort of secondary connections, so to speak, I think is hugely important. So I'll rewind here back to a lot of slides to go back through, so I apologize for all the flipping, but this is overview here. Any other questions?
For idea 3, what are the ideas for the downtown shoulder?
It's one of my favorites, so
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that. So just a quick preface here. This was under the title of downtown becoming a destination. And I love the quote about standing out, not just being like any other small town. And one of the ways that we want to do that, I mentioned at the top, was when we asked what are things that people love and value about downtown, and we want to build around those. And if we do that right, if we have a good understanding of what are those things that are valued and we can protect those, then it should do 2 things for us. One is it should continue to have value to the local community because we've built some ideas and recommendation investment around things that people love. So there should be that connection to residents and those who live in Gainesville. The benefit in terms of bringing visitors and fresh investment is that that's what makes Gainesville authentic. So when we think about the Sweetwater Branch Creek, when we think about other assets that the community has, we want to build on those local assets because that's what people want to visit Gainesville for. They don't want to go to Huntsville, Alabama for the same reason they're going to Gainesville, Florida. They want something that's unique here. So our goal is to identify the natural features, cultural assets, all of these pieces that we can build around to do that. So I'm going to forward a little bit to the question at hand. And so this has to do with Sweetwater Park as the jewel. And what I love, I was actually on at Sweetwater Park today, and of course it exists as a park. It's a beautiful park, particularly on a day like today, but it is also a largely untapped asset for the community. And by that, I mean, it is directly adjacent to the historic core, but doesn't have any really logical access. Most of the uses there sort of back onto it or side onto it. Think about the library, the federal courthouse, or other things. There's no really gateway into it. From the surrounding neighborhoods, there are opportunities to access it, but there's not really a sort of signal that this is a welcoming public space, really clear access to it. And so you think about East Gainesville and the neighborhood to the east and downtown and Juncture along the Sweetwater Portal and Sweetwater Park. This could be a great threshold into downtown that serves both the neighborhoods as you move to the east and downtown as you move to the west. And one of the things that we love to look at is the fact that it is a dynamic natural feature. It floods, and it should. And it's not a place for building homes and businesses right on top of. We want to uncover it. We want to improve water quality. We want to make it a natural feature. So thinking of things like environmental education, nature play that you see over here, how we tie into the library, the Mathesons, and the other cultural assets that are there. There's such great synergy around the park. And so many things are tantalizingly close. I can picture the library. The main collection in the reading room has all of these beautiful windows that look out over the courtyard to the Sweetwater Park. But you have a few library vans sort of parked there in the back, a couple odds and ends, and the kids' space below spills out to it. You have, again, if you bear in mind that one of our goals is to make the parking assets more welcoming and safer, you have one of your downtown parking garages that's 1 block from this. So in terms of being able to bring people to the park. So thinking of how we could potentially use Southeast First as a major gateway that takes you and has a formal entrance from the historic district in the park, looking at the other entrances for the neighborhood along here, and then giving the opportunity for some of these cultural institutions like Matheson and the library, and even some of the potential development here, to take advantage and, if not front onto it, at least have a welcoming edge that allows you to access the park. So the park is wonderful, but it could be tremendous in terms of what it offers, both the historic core, the Sweetwater Greenway, and the interface between the neighborhoods to the east and downtown.
Okay. I believe we have a question from one of our members, Member Norquist.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. My apologies. Great presentation, great work. The one question that I had is, has there been any discussion by the community about a connection between the University of Florida and downtown? You're talking a lot about I like the loop concept. I love the discussion related to the Sweetwater Park, linear park area. But I was wondering, is there anything talking about connecting to Innovation Square? I saw you had 6th Street there as part of your loop. And so I was curious about that. Thank you.
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you. And I just forwarded to a slide that falls underneath the notion of strengthening the relationship to neighborhoods. And so this is where we've looked at some of those key corridors that can connect both neighborhoods and districts. So 4th Avenue and 2nd Avenue, both for that matter. And it's okay to have a positive redundancy of connections. You don't have to rely on one single corridor. But 4th Avenue to a great extent because it runs along the edge of Porters and Spring Hill, to a large extent Second as well. We have highlighted these as really key east-west corridors that do just that, allow you to connect both the near downtown neighborhoods and UF and the Innovation District to the historic core. And we've also looked north-south at what some of these key opportunities are as well.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Could you go back to the previous slide where you had this opportunity sites? That was it.
Oh, yeah.
That opportunity site south of the library, that's the federal courthouse.
It is a federal courthouse.
And the one east of Matheson Museum, the one-story office building.
So this is what I was talking over lunch with Eric and Street about. One of the things that when you look at downtown now, there is a preponderance of local government buildings. And that's not necessarily a negative. They're great employers, but there's a large number of courthouses, government buildings, other things like that. And it can be tempting to say, well, there's just too much inertia with a federal courthouse or a county courthouse. We really can't plan around that. And one of the things that we've seen is that when you invest, particularly in great public green space, and Depot Park may be one example, but you think of Falls Park in Greenville where I live, or Railroad Park in Birmingham, Alabama. It is amazing to see when great green space is created, how the community reacts to it, both in terms of the public activity that takes place there, how the community appropriates it, but also the way investment takes shape. Almost they sort of pull up around the campfire, so to speak, and start to see homes and businesses that say, hey, this is really cool. The people that I employ want to be next to this park. The people that are looking for places to live want to live next to this park. And so you think over time about some of the opportunities for these government buildings and what the sort of highest and best use in the future might be for your downtown historic core, having vibrant walkable streets and great uses along there. We just want to keep the window open for that opportunity, because what will happen at some point with all these buildings is they will reach the end of their useful capital life. And whether it's the GSA or whether it's the county or the city, they're going to come to the question of, do we rebuild in place? Do we relocate? The community needs to be ready to say, we've thought about this. We've looked at the opportunities here. Our values of our community are reflected in this plan we've adopted. Let's have a conversation with the group at that time.
Could you just review the ideas under housing and business? I think it's going.
Yes, I'm going to ask Matt Wetley. Again, Matt is with Development Strategies, one of our partners on the project, and their focus is looking at development economics and real estate market and how that relates to the planning process. So, yeah, Matt, I can navigate for you if you want, or you have to move over here, I think, if you wanted to. Is that right?
It should work over there.
Is it going to work over there now? Okay. All right. Let me start here.
Great. Well, while we're getting set up, I just wanted to say how great it is to be here. We've been working for a little over a year and a half. This is my first time being here with you all in person. So our focus is on development, community, real estate, economic development. In the context of a plan like this, a lot of what we're doing is focusing on development issues that involve partners, that involve things that the private sector or private market is usually leading. So as a governmental entity, a downtown agency, often what you're doing is trying to influence behavior, putting policies in place, creating incentives. As it pertains to housing, the rising cost of housing has been an issue nationally. The city is putting in place a new housing fund and hiring a new person to kind of oversee housing. So there's going to be an opportunity to use some new tools that other cities are trying. And so I wanted to share that with you because some of the things we're going to be putting forth are in the context of that. There's like a citywide There's going to be a citywide housing fund and somebody overseeing that. And so what we're trying to do is advocate for how to best use new tools and existing tools in different ways for downtown in ways that help this community achieve some of the goals that you all expressed. So with that, something that Darren pointed out, when we looked at downtown, we think it would be, we think a vibrant downtown is one that's going to serve everyone, right? And that's something that we heard over and over from residents as part of the engagement process. And we looked at downtown, we didn't see really a whole lot of development other than student housing. So it wasn't just that there isn't affordable housing being delivered, there isn't market rate housing, there isn't workforce housing. It's been just primarily student housing, right? I'm not telling you all anything you don't know, you live here, right? But coming from out of town, it's really striking the degree to which nothing else housing-wise is getting built. So one of the things we want to do is start to set policies that kind of change the conversation from not having development to getting the right kind of development. And, attracting development in the core and housing without displacing people here, making downtown more inclusive, and that's addressing housing at scale, which is something I'll share with you. And then leveraging investments, taking harnessing really the parts of the market and the economy where you are seeing development, i.e. student housing, and thinking about how do we, if this is development that's happening, how do we leverage that and create revenue sources to help support and incentivize development of more of the things we want, or that the community is saying we want. So we think about it in terms of an ecosystem, right? And so if you think about, housing for everyone, yes, there's student, there's affordable, there's market rate, and then we also need to be thinking about each of the individual neighborhoods on each edge and how they impact and are impacted by the housing market. So again, kind of like looking at the downtown or looking at the area we're studying, right? This guy right here, we plotted out what's happened, what development has happened. It's really striking, right? A lot of that red, that student housing, you see that just to the west, right? But very little, almost no development in the core of your downtown. And there's no place where developing housing is going to be more environmentally sustainable, more equitable, more value-adding for your economy, because this is the center of your community. This is where you have that cluster of jobs. So we want to figure out ways to put people where they can access transit, where they can access jobs. And as we look around, these different things these different numbers mean different things, right? So, we kind of looked at different metrics. We looked at government programs that'll fund housing, what the rent limits are. We looked at what the average price of non-student housing is today in kind of the downtown. And we also have these neighborhoods where the average home price varies wildly, right? So, and so you wouldn't want a one-size-fits-all approach even to the neighborhoods, right? In one case, you might have housing that's very affordable, but it probably needs investment in order to be, quality affordable housing. In other areas, housings are rapidly becoming unaffordable. And so what a holistic strategy would be, and again, keeping in mind there's going to be a new tool, right? A new citywide housing fund that could help bridge the gap to fund some different types of housing efforts than what you all have seen before. So in the neighborhoods, it's about, okay, how do we get investment in some of the housing needs, it needs an upgrade. How do we invest in that without significantly raising rents, displacing the people that are there? There are existing tools to deliver kind of mixed use affordable housing. They're limited though. It's not gonna, when we talk about addressing affordable housing at scale, we've seen demand for hundreds, if not thousands of mixed use and affordable housing units. These programs historically have been pretty limited in terms of the numbers that they can provide. And then, yeah, that market rate housing for, young professionals, very important. And that's an important part of a downtown ecosystem that we don't see. So addressing housing at scale, what we are proposing, and really thinking about this as kind of these two sides of this coin, right? On one hand, we look at the whole region, and there's demand for like 16,000 affordable units. And at the same time, Gainesville has not been and is not projected to do particularly well in attracting talents and keeping those UF graduates staying here. And that's a problem because we need to figure out a way to fund a lot of affordable housing. And this is your next generation of job creators and entrepreneurs and startups. And so we need to figure out a way to serve all of this. How do we get more, and downtown housing and having a robust and vibrant downtown environment is an important part of that. So, so how do we get there? And, you know, we talked about one idea is addressing housing at scale, and here's what we mean. We mean looking at creating policies that allow types of housing that you want to flourish at a district or neighborhood-wide scale, as opposed to a single site. So a single site approach is, hey, developers come in with a proposal, let's get them to require, you know, let's require them to have 5 or 10% of the units as affordable, or 15. And that's fine, that can be part of an approach, but it doesn't lead to a lot of units, right? 5 units here, 10 units there. It will add up, but it's not gonna lead to big numbers. Having a fund that invests in housing that you have that is affordable but needs upgrades, that's a much bigger way to get it to increase the number of affordable, quality affordable units without displacing people. That neighborhood approach is important. You could leverage existing tools like low-income housing tax credits to maybe invest in or fund mixed-use affordable projects. And also, on the right here, we've got set-asides, again, requiring some number of affordable units as part of a market rate project. But identifying some larger sites where larger development happens, that's going to lead to a much bigger number. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We're proposing a variety of policies that could be done in a much more intentional way with the housing fund that can lead to a much bigger number than just requiring 5 units out of a new development project. So that's what we mean by thinking about housing at scale, addressing housing at scale. You know, and then the question of how does Gainesville pay for it? Kind of talked about that a little bit. I mean, an important part is certainly attracting that next generation of job creators and all of that. That's an important piece on the revenue side. We've got a whole list of tools and a whole list of recommendations because the new housing fund, there's opportunities to shape it. What we want to do is make some recommendations as part of this downtown effort to guide and steer that. And so, you know, exploring that expansion of housing funding sources. One of the things we can do is leverage student housing development. So we're working in a number of university communities, Clemson, Blacksburg come to mind, where, you know, it's a very lucrative development, but to require those developers to set aside 10 or 15% of their units for affordable housing, like a lot of families don't want to live with students, right? So instead you create a tool where instead of doing that, that developer can dedicate those funds that can go to that housing fund that then can be used to help subsidize affordable housing somewhere else in the community where it's more desirable for, say, families or, you know, the low-income households. So there's a whole variety of tools. Happy to talk about any of those in more detail if you like. And then but those are affordable housing tools. And then on the market rate side, a lot of this involves, whereas the previous page really involves, or slide involves creating new tools. This involves a lot of efforts that could use existing tools, things like tax abatement. Sometimes to get some market rate housing going, you have to create some kind of incentive. The fact that we're not seeing a lot of it downtown tells us it's risky for a developer to do market rate housing today. So creating something like a tax abatement, a lot of the downtowns that get a lot of market rate housing and even mixed income housing started first by creating some kind of incentive tool to kind of reduce that cost or that friction of development. So that's So we're recommending exploring some of these, some of the tools on the table and leverage them.
Hey, Matt, before we move into that, I think number one, I've had a question there.
Yeah,
On slide 11, idea 11, Mr. Porter.
yes.
Under explore expansion of housing funding sources, that payment in lieu of affordable units set aside, don't you have some, you have to have some kind of requirement in place to do affordable units to get that payment in lieu.
Right, so again, this is really on the creation of new tools side of the conversation. And so that's what having the new affordable or the new housing fund enables the city to do, to say, hey, okay, student housing developer, instead of just kind of what I was talking about, instead of building these student housing, these affordable units as part of your development, you can put that money into this fund, and we'll figure out how to allocate this or how to provide affordable housing where it's needed.
That's, that becomes kind of a double edge, because then you run into, when you get this money put together, and then try to find a site for it, you run into NIMBY, or you end up concentrating low income housing because you can't get people to let it happen all over the place.
You run into that, not even just with affordable housing. I mean, you run into that with anything over 3 stories downtown. You get people that are, you know, very concerned about that.
So that's what we're concerned about scale.
Yeah.
Speaking from a housing authority perspective, I've seen how hard it is to get sites for supported housing. And making people put into a fund, means you with a big fund and no place you can use it. That's useful. That's advantageous for the people who occupy it. Or you end up concentrating, going over the areas where it's already low income housing, further concentrating low income areas.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep that in mind as we're writing recommendations. If you have thoughts on specific recommendations to make, we're happy to consider those and fold those into this plan. A lot of this is, again, it's the downtown strategy, and this is the opportunity to say, hey, we understand there's this citywide fund that's being developed. Here's how we think downtown can play a role. So we're happy to incorporate that thing, because we do see that challenge every that NIMBYism challenge. Most places we're working.
The point of thinking about affordable housing requirements is to be able to end economic segregation of housing, mixed income housing. So you giving developers a way out, you got to accomplish it.
We have a question, I believe, Member Brown.
Yes, this is very, very detailed information. It's very good. I like Member Blunt would like to see, and I think this does address it in a lot of ways, the housing component. And I think you guys have done an excellent job in addressing a lot of those possibilities. Inclusionary housing as a part of the zoning code, as you stated earlier, would only address a small number here and there. Doing it through the fund leads to what Member Blunt said, concentrated low-income housing in little pockets. So I think a combination is really probably a better goal to try to accomplish. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So things we're seeing communities do. So with this fund, there could be market-based projects that the developers proposing that these funds could help augment that. And so when you have new projects, this could help ensure that a certain number of those are affordable. And so you're building mixed income right into a single development.
And I will say my other concern, because I notice most of this is regarding multifamily as opposed to single family. Now, whether those will be, for sale or they end up being rentals, and again, what I would hate to see would be individuals on the lower income scale just becoming forever renters and not being able to afford to own their own. So that's a real concern for me.
Well, and that's a great point, and two things on that. One thing that the citywide fund could do, I mean, it's still under development, so this is a great opportunity when you're doing a downtown plan to say, hey, here's some ways that this fund could be really wisely used and beneficial. So we work in a lot of communities where you've got a citywide or neighborhood housing fund where actually a lot of the money goes into just shoring up the single family housing that's there. A lot of times a unit is affordable, but it needs $30,000 of investment to be kind of brought up to some level of standard or quality. And so a fund can enable you to do that without having to raise the rent on the person that's there. So you do you're maintaining the affordability. You're not displacing the person, but you are improving the quality of the housing. So, so that could be part of the single family strategy. And also a housing fund as these develop. We're seeing them develop rent to own programs and things of that nature. So home ownership very important. It's it's the single biggest way that families, working families, middle class families accumulate wealth and pass it on to the next generation, pay for schools, education, things like that. So very, very important.
Sort of another question, not kind of tangential from the housing, but again with the real estate. One of the things we're seeing downtown is, we do have development, we do have a couple large hotels coming up, and some other big plans coming. But as far as I've seen, the rates that they're going to charge for for like commercial space on their bottom floors tends to be the kinds of things that only another Starbucks can afford, or another Chipotle, or another Moe's, because they spread those things out. And we've also already seen them try and flex their muscle to push unique, interesting minority-owned businesses out of their spots. How do we address things like that from, it seems like the unique businesses was a very high priority on this plan. How do we address something like that to make it an attractive environment for small businesses to be able to rent and afford as well?
Yeah, great, and it's a great segue. I'll kind of maybe skip ahead to some of the thoughts on that. But again, the answer is kind of thinking about this as an ecosystem. So kind of final recommendations, but yeah, so we did spend some time thinking about this, and again, not a unique problem to Gainesville. New development comes in. A lot of times the city's even required, ground floor retail space, but it's in a prominent site, and the economics are such that they're charging high rents, which is, not affordable to, small business, and those kind of unique, distinctive, small businesses that usually tell more of a story, more of an authentic story about who you are as a community, right? And so again, we try to think about it as kind of an ecosystem. We like to be really mindful of like what different employers can pay, what kind of rents they need. And I know you can't see that Maker's Creative, but it's like, $8 to $10 a square foot. So there's kind of a two-part strategy. One is to look at different locations of buildings, right? So, looking for areas where space is a little less expensive, those can be great places for startups. But then what you were getting at, which is, kind of some of those prime Main Street locations where rents are really high, that also tends to be the highest visibility part of your community. And I think most, if not all communities we work in would like to have some part of their local entrepreneurs, local artisans celebrated in that highly visible space. So So that is a strategy, I would say, kind of not dissimilar from the housing fund. There would need to be some kind of new tool that we could recommend that again would help kind of subsidize that ground floor space. Again, if it's something that's highly lucrative like student housing, it's not as hard to underwrite, lower cost, but high quality space. For other developments, market rate development, the economics are a little different. So there would likely need to be some kind of funding tool. Again, it just helps, at the financing of that project to make sure that that rent is at, $12 or $15 a square foot. So there's kind of two pieces to that. It's like, we want really high quality space in our downtowns and new development, and that requires a high rent. And so we need some kind of tool to plug that gap. But then we can also think much more broadly about the whole downtown and think about, and these aren't mutually exclusive, but we can think about where is there inexpensive space today. We've seen some really, really cool districts emerge that are thriving with local entrepreneurs that if you would have gone there 10 years ago, it didn't look very cool. It didn't look very exceptional, but they got a marketing plan together. They started investing in those buildings, but not just one person, right? Like a group and a group of entrepreneurs with a cohesive plan, and that can be a role for a downtown to play to help kind of develop that marketing plan. And so whether it's some kind of bundled marketing district that might, could revolve around ceramics or some, anything unique or interesting or distinctive. Like, are there like burgeoning entrepreneurs that could maybe cluster together in some lower cost space that could be made cool? And so again, they're not mutually exclusive. I think that both strategies are things that we're gonna recommend here.
Yeah, I might just add a little bit, Chair Palmer, because we have sort of taken this out of order, which is good, just kind of going through there, discuss housing and other things. I think what got lost a little bit, Matt's alluding to, is taking the same approach with small business that he mentioned with the housing, where, Matt's point was you just have, 5-10% of the units here and there, you're not gonna get much. By the same token, when you have new development come in, all the focus is on that ground floor. What do we do here? How do we lease this up? Or maybe you have space that becomes vacant. What we want to say is, let's look proactively at these various areas through downtown. What's happening down on South Main, what's happening over in Innovation Square, Store Core, et cetera. What are the business types best aligned with those place-based qualities? What are the public investments that we can make to strengthen that quality of place? What are the funding tools, direct business support funding tools? So we're not just reacting to new development or space that just got vacated, but we're looking proactively at how we get businesses slotted in the right places where they can succeed.
Good. And I guess relating to some of this as well, was there any discussion? One of the big things that I've heard people talk about is trying to bring another major employer to town. Right now it feels a lot like we are reliant on UF. And we lose tech companies to West Gainesville because there's not the housing, and we've seen that a few different times. Are there any conversations about how and what we can do to attract those potentially a larger type of employer or something like that, or something like that into these areas that might help us, diversify Gainesville? Because that's, people work at UF, they get awesome education, and then everybody else wants to hire them, take them away. There are other businesses that have more of an upward growth potential with them that we can look at.
Absolutely. I think there's kind of three parts to that. We always think about like attracting a big company. That's like a swing for the fences, home run, approach. And that's an important part of, business attraction is important part of any economic strategy. At the same time, like base hits are getting small businesses up and running, creating that ecosystem that's really supportive. And some of those small businesses will stay small. Some of them may explode in terms of growth over time. And so I think that's what we want to do is create these opportunities that, certainly as we think about UF and some of the innovation districts, that's the idea behind an innovation district is that you are harnessing that sort of university growth to then spin off into, private industry and private jobs. But that's only going to be,
And they sort of already have a path to spin them out to San Blasco, that sort of an area.
Keep going to the next slide, Magda. I think this highlights it well. So one of the things that I like about this strategy, thinking about the different qualities of place, the types of businesses, is that if someone comes in and says, hey, I got a small business, I'm trying to get off the ground, got 3 employees, we need 1,500 square feet. I like, kind of the grit of old industrial buildings and stuff like that. You go here, right? And you go down South Main around Depot Park, some of those highway, if you've got a business that you're trying to expand and you can't commit to a 7-year lease, you're not sure how big you're going to be, you've got flexible lease terms, or you're going to another area. Or if you're a major multinational company that you want to attract, where do we have large parcels or even blocks under single ownership? So whether that's on West University or some of the innovation districts. So this gives us a little bit of a menu to say for different types of businesses that we either want to grow or attract, there's locations where they may best fit.
Any other questions?
So I love the presentation. I love everything I've heard, and it's very comprehensive. It addresses in this district something that's much larger than just the district in terms of problems we're trying to address. I think my question is, your services in terms of what you're doing right now, how far does that go? Because I'm looking at things that are like projects that may have a completion date, but then there are things that need to be ongoing. How does the city interface with all this to support these? Because there's an exploration phase, right? That you talked about with all these ideas. But then once we explore these things, who is going to manage the implementation? Who is going to see that it's sustained and moves forward? Because a lot of times these ideas, they're great, and then they somehow get lost in the mix. And we say, we had this meeting, we have great ideas, but
Yeah.
what happened?
That's
So if you can kind of help
that's
us see the future.
great segue, Member Mitchell. This actually is the last section that we had here because we share the sense of positive urgency about having, the ability to manage that. In fact, Street and I are just having a sidebar conversation about that. So one of the things we hear a lot referenced is, well, look at Celebration Point, for example. Look, maybe it's clean or, they have an environment that I like there or certain things are going on there. And what most people may not have as perspective is that when you run a business, when you pay rent in a place like that, you have additional rent that you pay. Usually it's called common area maintenance or some sort of additional surcharge that covers the cost of that developer maintaining the district or putting up holiday lights or doing other things like that. So in other words, there's a structure in place and a single management entity that's responsible for that full development. Well, downtown, that doesn't exist right now. And so to getting full circle to your question, who's responsible for downtown? Who makes it look nice and inviting over the holidays? Who programs it and does events and activities there? Who cleans the street? And so one of the things that we want to do is look for that entity that would implement this plan and be the long-term steward of downtown. And it would have a number of different roles and it can sort of grow over time. So these are examples, when you look below, these are some of the organizations that we've worked with in either downtowns or urban neighborhoods that have done this. So everything from 3CDC in Cincinnati to Midtown, Atlanta. But a lot of them start with what you would think of as your clean and safe a lot, and we'll see street ambassadors where they're addressing those things that aren't quite public safety issues, but they're a little more than individual business owners can, care for and maintain. Lots of times, these groups will have social workers that are involved, so that when it comes to dealing with maybe it's the homeless population downtown, they can help find the right resources to support them. So these organizations can do everything from clean and safe up through starting to create that downtown identity and market and brand it, create those activities and programs that draw people downtown, and even get to the point where they can start to look at public space, affordable housing, small businesses. How do you recruit businesses and curate the business mix that's downtown? Who's responsible for attracting and making sure we get the business mix that we want that appeals to the community? So someone has to be responsible for that, and there's various models that we've looked at that can do that. And so our goal here is to create, it's a little bit of a jargony phrase, but a place management organization downtown. And we think there's really two key things that organization needs to do day one. The first is address what I would call livability or business viability issues. So let's say you are interested in living downtown, or maybe you're interested in opening a business downtown. What are the hurdles that are preventing you from doing that? I don't know, it feels a little dirty or unsafe, or there's no one is making this a place that people recognize, and I'm on my own, no one's sort of branding or creating some idea, all those hurdles that say it's really tough for me to make this work. So how do we address those basic livability and business viability issues? And then the other that it needs to do day one is say what makes downtown unique? What are the pieces of downtown that give it a competitive niche, and make sure that they are responsible for maintaining those and growing those over time. So if we can do those two things with a place management organization, then it can grow over time into other roles if the community sees fit to endow it with those responsibilities. But there does need to be a group that looks specifically at downtown to maintain it. And you see this sort of building capacity over time.
Would this be the governmental or a private agency?
So I'll give you an example. State of Georgia. They have created, Georgia is largely a rural state. Atlanta is one huge exception. But the state legislature has created enabling legislation for community improvement districts. And you see a lot of them in the Atlanta metro area. And essentially what the legislature recognized is that there are certain needs for these urban neighborhoods and urban districts that the city or other entities just can't meet. So they have allowed these districts to create organizations. In the case of Georgia, they're assessment districts. So you go around to all the property owners and say, hey, do you feel strongly enough about the ability to care for the space, around this neighborhood that you're willing to assess yourself to fund an organization that would do this? And the state has enabled the ability for local districts to do that. So we create community improvement districts. There are different ways to fund it. They don't have to be assessment districts. There's all sorts of different models for it, but what they are I would call quasi-governmental organizations in the sense that they're working in the public interest, and their governance is made up of a diversity of interests in whatever neighborhood or downtown you happen to be working in. And they're doing what are effectively public works in a way that's difficult for a city or county or other local governments to accomplish on their own. Yes.
Short of creating a new office or agency, I would think that would need to be maybe an assistant city manager working with CRA and economic development. So, Eric, what's the new name for this economic development? The
Economic opportunity and social progress.
I think it would be a combination CRA, or our current iteration of CRA, we've left the state definition.
We both are folks executing, because they've done a very good job keeping that place.
And one thing that this board can do is that, we could spend several hours talking about all these different organizations and governance models and how they're funded and everything. But at the end of the day, we need individuals, whether they're business owners or whether they're civic-minded residents or whatever it may be. We need individuals that are passionate about downtown and the value that it can bring to the community to start to be part of this place management organization. It's a void right now. And I feel a sense of urgency, and I know Eric and Sarit do, with one of the shortcomings of planning efforts, any kind of planning effort, is you hear people say, well, where's the accountability? How do we get this done? And what I want to do is I want to sort of put your feet to the fire in a positive way to say, if one person could wave a magic wand and make it happen, we'd probably be a little nervous about that person. It has to happen with broad-based support. We need organizations, we need boards, we need individuals who empower us by affirming the work in this plan, making elected and appointed officials know that they support this, identifying champions that can help move forward, and then that starts to give us foundation for the management and creation of a great downtown.
What are we doing? Are we doing on time and stuff?
Actually, earlier on, when you had all the different points, I wanted to ask about 8 and 9, but since Connect the Neighborhoods came up again just a moment ago, I wanted to ask about that further. Connect neighborhoods to downtown and the transition areas, especially, well, what do you mean by connect neighborhoods to downtown?
That's where earlier we were looking at both east, west, and north, south. For example,
Just with the physical.
4th
traffic.
Avenue, yeah, those kind of connections. So intersections, if
I
you want to
thought you had
say,
some voice into policy for those neighborhoods to talk to downtown about what their area is.
that can be another layer, but yeah, we were referring to the physical connections, yeah.
And transition areas, that just means, what does it look like when you separate from downtown to?
Right. And specifically, we want to look at the regulatory environment. So when you think about land use and development, how do we look at things like height, density, frontage, character, all those things that would help address that transition from commercial corridors to neighborhood character?
Well, full disclosure, I'm from the neighborhood just 2 blocks this way. We had big concern about some plan suggestions that look like huge density right on top of, right next to it, just adjacent.
Yeah, so that'd be a great example of what we want to try and get out ahead of.
Got, I guess, maybe 2 last things.
Sure.
One, I'd be interested to see, I guess, as a component of this, some of the housing effects and things. One of the big things that I always find interesting about Gainesville is, there's the challenge against increased density and increased housing, because, nobody wants to live in a nice little house right next to a high rise. That's very, very understandable. Then there's the other challenge of, from my understanding, how GRU is funded and works. If we have that increased density within these sort of areas, there is potential for, better distribution of the overall power costs for people. So maybe there are some challenges there. I don't know if that needs a study of something like that, or whether or not that is something that would be around this, but it does seem that the power rates are a big sensitive issue within the city. We're sitting here, and so I think somehow affecting that in and with some of the housing opportunities, and especially the affordable housing, might go a long way to help, kind of communicate some of these things. I mean, if I don't know that this helps for people, but if, I could say, well, there's going to be a high rise next to you, but your power bill is going to go down $50 a month, something like that. Are you okay with that? And that might be, because then we actually let people almost make the real questions of putting this, then they have to make those questions. If you're not okay with that $50 a month off your power bill for that, then you're like, okay, no, I'm still against it.
My sunlight is down 50% per day too.
Right, yeah. So, if you weigh the trade-offs, but I think there is some real teeth to, this increased density could potentially actually, have a bigger lowering impact of costs for people, even not just in downtown Gainesville, but through most of Gainesville. Yeah. If I'm even understanding that correctly, and I could just be, completely misunderstanding how some of that stuff works, but I think that would be something worth, looking into for some of the further presentations, because I do know that power sensitivity is something that follows along with these things.
Okay.
And then I guess this is probably right towards the end of your presentation, but what do we have as far as, you know, kind of a not just a roadmap, but kind of like the next steps within these ideas, almost like the hierarchy of you know, if we want to start attracting these developments, we need to get these programs in place here. We need to get sort of the organization things first, get all that stuff done, and then boom, boom. Is that later on in your slides?
Not in the material that we prepared for today, but I can speak to that. I think the way that we hope this process will work is we'll get a sense, and I think we have this evening from our conversation and with the public meeting tomorrow and from City Commission, if some of these ideas hold water where they are in the development today, that sort of gives us the green light, I think, to do exactly what you're saying is we want to get a sense of priorities for these. Those priorities could be need-based or opportunity-based, right? You know, we could have a very pressing need that elevates one of these things to the foreground, or we might have an opportunity where someone wants to invest or start something and we want to be able to capture that opportunity. So we'll look at those priorities based on what we hear from the community. And then I said this earlier today, and I feel very strongly about, I don't like personally doing planning work that we can't put into place and stand up and implement for the community. So I'm a strong proponent of having some specific steps that are feasible, that have roles and responsibilities, and people can wrap their arms around and move forward. So that's going to be a big part once we get some affirmation of these ideas that we'll put in place for each.
Cool. Yeah, I think that next steps of planning things are would be really valuable for us.
Yeah, and we've heard from others that they're excited that we take that as a good thing when, you know, if you're, hey, how do we do this? There's a little bit implicit that, yes, let's try and make this happen. We've heard from others that want to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is, a lot of these things are, you know, I love seeing it come together. I don't think most of us are surprised by most of the ideas on here, you know, because these are kind of been ongoing conversations that I think we're all, you know, have heard through our community. And I think that, you know, speaks to the power of this presentation as well, is that, you know, you guys have done work, and I know, you know, a lot of the other people that have done a lot of work on this. I mean, my personal opinion is I think you know, are very much in the right direction. I'm really excited to see next steps from that.
Good, thank you.
Anybody else? Any other comments before we?
Thank you for the
Yeah.
presentation. Chair,
Thank you.
really did a work with added value in terms of trying to get our community better. My concern is just that when we're trying to do too much, people kind of like the pace of things. Making it more attractive, you know, density, as it loses its speed. I'm from Jacksonville, I think it's fast.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's here is that it's slower pace,
Yeah.
you know, and so speaking of trade-offs, you know, we do a lot of things, is it gonna lose that feel? You know, but I'm also for growth and expansion and more opportunities as well, so hopefully we can strike the right balance.
Yes.
Yep. Great. One comment from Member Norquist.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. You talked about this concept of, sounded to me like a downtown authority. Sounded like you know, some kind of a separate entity that is carrying out this plan that you're talking about. Do you have any examples of other cities that have something, that kind of structure that you're talking about putting in place that would be an example to us to look to?
We do. Yeah, and in fact, it's interesting that you asked because it's almost rare in some ways when we're working in a community that doesn't have some form of group that's focused on their downtown. I don't mean that as a disparaging remark about Gainesville, but just to say that yes, there are lots of examples that we can share. Several of them are in the material that you have sort of listed under there. And lots of cities have multiple organizations, not just one, but, some for various neighborhoods or districts. So, yeah, and if you'd like some specific follow-up on that, I can get some correspondence pulled together, for the board.
I think we would. I think there's a few of us that have been interested in having conversations around those things.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Go on to our carbon preservation. If you're ready, we'll have, give you a few minutes.
We just had a written agenda item, but since this was written, we have a slight change. We have 3 pending showcase contracts now. So those are not the Drinks Reality, but the market rate homes. So that means that 19 lots are available. Did you have any specific questions about Heartwood or?
Just general progress, the things of those natures. So there are 3 market days. I'm sorry, how's the Dreams to Reality program? How's that progressing?
So those
Cost
are,
restraints and all that.
say that again.
In the midst of all the high prices, cost.
So the Drinks to Reality, they each signed a contract. We have a contract with them. They're at a fixed price. So their price will not change. Since we have the contract with them and went under contract with the builders, there was an increase in price in construction. So I can't remember what month it was, but we did have leadership allowed us to basically absorb the cost. So
Is that really significant, that cost?
well, so the homes are being built with a construction department, sorry, not construction department, cost plus. So the builders are billing us and we are paying them basically their expenses plus 18% overhead and profit. So they presented us with proposed or estimated project costs, but we won't know the actual costs until we're closer to the end and everything has been purchased.
How many homes was that?
11.
That may be significant. My understanding, construction costs for each house are $20,000-$30,000 more than they were a year ago. Kind of thing.
That's
It's a
about,
challenging bit, but
Is it maximum caps there on it?
not necessarily, but we would have to go back if we need more than what we originally. We have a certain amount budgeted.
I think that might be a conversation that's happening at some point. What happens with that? I mean, is that something that we can make a recommendation on, or we should have that as a conversation? I have a feeling that's.
Yeah, if you, you can make a recommendation or you could just add it to the next agenda.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah. Could we add that to the next agenda? Yeah, or just to specifically address the rising kind of construction issues and make sure we, have a little bit of a discussion, trying to, I don't know, do what we can to help support you guys to help, make that problem easier. Because the last thing I think we want to do is, run into a situation where 11 people or 11 families are looking for a house. And all of a sudden, there's not that money. That would be that would be a big tragedy. So, yeah. I guess if we can add that to the agenda item next week or next month. Yeah, thank you.
And your perception of the marketing, to take a look.
So we have been holding open houses. We haven't had any, well, last weekend was Easter. So there hasn't been any open houses the last couple of weekends, but we generally have them, our Team Dynamo is having open houses on Sundays. And we're in the parade of homes this year. So the builders anticipate, the team anticipates there to be a good response from that. So we're hoping that our concern is how many homes can you build at a time?
To refresh my memory, is it 28 lots, how many lots?
34.
34.
So 11 dreams to reality, 1 model home. 3 under contract. Leaves 19.
That's all I have questions about. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any public comment?
Question.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
New deal, GCR staff. One of the things I did want to bring full circle is that in the beginning, we were talking about communication. And so Phil Mann mentioned that on the 28th, we will be going to GPC. I would welcome any of you if you'd like to attend via Zoom or in person. The General Policy Committee is going to be on April 28th. And moving forward, I think what the idea would be is to have communication come to you first as the advisory board, then to the city commission, and then also to the county, and to keep these communication going. So I wanted to invite you and see if that is something that you might be able to attend. I do have GTAC repositioning on the 28th agenda, so perfect question, and I'm happy to discuss that. So I'm going to say GTAC repositioning and Cornerstone sort of as a way that I think they go hand in hand. And so we did bring to you Jim Greenwood as our consultant, the report at the end of November. And that report really listened to the tenants at GTAC, the community, and also the advisory board. The idea was to come back with a report really looking at the gem that GTAC is as a building, but also how we can support small, local, and diverse businesses that are thriving there at GTAC. And so with that, the goal was to go out and to look for consultants and also architectural firms to start working towards a master plan. And I have good news. We are in discussions, and we do have 2 proposals that are going through procurement right now. One is the idea was to take someone like Jim Greenwood, who has 38 years of running a successful incubator and has the insight that he has, to ask him to do something maybe a little different than he's ever done before, to have someone like that come on and help implement and oversee some of the decisions that are made, because we want to get it right. And so right now, that proposal is the idea of having him help our team look at Santa Fe College and some opportunities to have a partnership that might be different in programming. So that would come out of that proposal. Also, some of the operational and financial decisions that we talked about, utilizing his experience and what we know from that report. And then also some programming, like I mentioned, with Santa Fe College, or some programming that we have with the GCRA. And then ideally, when we go into the master plan, the idea would be, let's make sure that we hear what the tenant's needs are. So for instance, the way, if you've been to GTAC recently, some of the ways that the rooms are set up, someone may want, we'll say, a 300 square foot facility, or an office with an actual door, or 600. So if there's any repositioning of that building, that we take that into consideration. I think that the master plan, the idea would be to do it as a phased approach. And so if you haven't had the opportunity, I welcome you to come into the GCRA office. I've been calling that our model home. It's something that we spent some time, so come have some coffee and ask any questions that you have. The idea would be that we could look at doing something a little differently, instead of maybe breaking up that master plan into a phased approach. So for instance, if there's common areas that we could use that model home, and what we did and what we have heard that we've done well, doing that in some of the common areas, but not areas that would be touched if there's other things that come out of the master plan. So hopefully here, you will be seeing some of this move forward. in that phased approach. I'd be happy to answer any questions with that, but I do want to let you know that we are hosting quarterly GTech tenant luncheons as well, so that we continue to build that relationship and support. And that is in conjunction with Santa Fe College. And then we do have the mobile health bus out there continuing on Fridays as well. And that's been going well. Questions?
Yeah, a couple. First, the GPC meeting on the 28th, do that need to be co-advertised as GCRA also, if someone of us attend?
If you're planning to be there in person, I think we've been okay with you going to commission meetings and having multiple people speak. It's one item on there, so I don't think it has to be, but I can find out for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
We'll make sure it's legal.
Yes.
And you mentioned, going out for another consultant. And I always wonder when we go to consultants, of all the talent we have in the Department of Jewelry and housing, other areas in the city, and these people are already on local government payroll, why we always look for consultants? Do we not have in-house talent in the city's vast staff to do things?
That's a tough question, and I will definitely tell you that it's something that we struggle with every time to make sure that if we're going out for a consultant, that the intent is good and that we're trying to get it right. I think in this particular situation I can speak to, having someone that has 38 years of experience in research and incubators and programming and how to run it, I think that is something that would provide us an opportunity to hope is to get it right the first time.
And last thing, you mentioned the GTech quarterly luncheon. That's to invite in prospective people that might bring an enterprise into their building.
All the tenants that currently reside at GTech, it's an opportunity while we're in the meanwhile to meet with them, to understand the needs, and to keep them posted on this GTech repositioning, and also any opportunities. Like for instance, last luncheon, one of the questions was, how do I, as a small local and diverse business owner, do business with the city? So we said, let's get those answers for you. So we invited procurement, and we also invited the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and we had an entire meeting with the best subject matter experts to help while we're in this meanwhile, while we come back with power programming and support to those tenants.
What's the schedule of that next week?
The next one will be in May. That's a TBD or to be determined date, that I can get that to you, and all of you are welcome at any time to come and be a part of that. And we did identify that that particular meeting was so well received that it probably should be something that we should do quarterly. So I wish you could have been at that one, but I welcome you anytime. But that was just, that kind of support is what we're hoping to bring, especially out of the consultant and programming too.
Well, man, again, I'd like to go back to Mr. Paul's question about having the talent on staff. It's not a matter of the city doesn't have the talent on staff. It's been in most cases, we've already got the max talent. You can ask any one of these people what their workload is. I don't think they're telling you the place all the time.
What, you guys have to sleep or something?
Yeah, those old school people who go think of the Maytag experiment.
Okay.
And that's why Phil's here today. Is there any other questions or concerns? Oh, yes, please.
Well, after listening to Matt's portion of the presentation we just heard in terms of retail spaces downtown and businesses and trying to leverage that stuff, I automatically thought of Greenhouse Financial with some of the other people in the incubator that are looking for spaces and how maybe there's a good connection there to explore when we start talking about this stuff in more detail, because maybe there's some kind of programming and way that we could help those people that are trying to shoestring their business and move into reputable or good locations, get actual spaces downtown, you know, that are running strong businesses and viable businesses. So I would encourage that stay vigilant and looking at that as a possibility as they talk through what they could do with this downtown district, power district.
You're welcome to our luncheons. We have conversations just like this. How can we do that? So thank you. That's great.
That'd be a really cool idea. Like if you want $12 a square foot on nice retail space, you gotta be part of GTEC and go to these monthly things that, so we know that you're, you know, doing what you need to do for financial viability. So, very much. I think that's everything. Is there any other comments?
We have another member of this. Making sure we didn't miss
No,
any
I just haven't
questions.
seen
Okay,
it.
okay, I'm making sure. Okay, Thank you.
Thank you.
Great questions.
Do we have any public comment?
Chairman, the one thing I want to remind the members of the board, this weekend is the Fifth Avenue Arts Festival. GCRA will be there. And so certainly tell everybody, welcome to join us the festival.
I want to share with everybody a community fundraiser about the people of Ukraine. And if anybody has some place they can put up a flyer with that has not public traffic, I'd love for you to take one. Thank you.
Member Seawright apologizes for her absence, but she's at home sick and she had death in the family.
Sorry to hear that.
She apologizes.
Under our regard. All right. That being said, we'll call the next meeting will be Tuesday, May 17th. Without any objection, we'll call the meeting to a close.